Our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. I'll be your host. My name is Clara Boulanger. I work on the marketing team here at Coveo, and I'm really excited to be a part of today's session. I'm also thrilled to be joined by our speaker, Paul Sheridan, who is the sales engineer at Coveo. I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover quickly before we get started. First, everyone is in listen-only mode. However, we do want to hear from you during today's presentation. We'll be answering questions at the end of this session, so please feel free to send those along using the Q&A section on your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive the presentation within 24 hours of the conclusion of the event. Finally, there will be a brief survey at the end of the session. Please help us improve future webinars by providing your feedback on the webinar content and experience. For those of you just joining us, welcome to our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. Now let's get started. Paul, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Clara. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for joining today. I hope this will be an informative session for you. We do these webinars once a month as a sort of general overview of a demo of Coveo within the context of Sitecore. So what we'll be doing today is going through a little bit of an architectural overview and description of what Coveo is and what we do in the context of Sitecore, as well as taking you through some examples of customer sites that have deployed Coveo and Sitecore, and a little bit of the back end as well. The Sitecore configuration and Coveo administration tools as well. But this is really just a bit of an overview, an introduction, if you will, and we'd be very happy to hear from you subsequently to be able to do a more custom conversation about your needs for search, for relevance within the context of Sitecore or indeed outside of Sitecore. So please feel free to reach out to us after today's call if we show some things that may be of interest to you. So a very brief introduction and really a single slide about Coveo and Sitecore. What is Coveo in the context of Sitecore? We, as you saw on the title slide, often use the term AI-powered search for Sitecore. What Coveo is all about, of course, is that we're a relevance engine. We're an indexing and search engine. We also take advantage of some really advanced techniques, whether manual rules or machine learning-driven boosting of relevance and recommendations on content. But really at our core, of course, what we do is we index data. There may be pages from your Sitecore site or sites, of course. There may be content from external sources, what we'd say non-Sitecore sources. Perhaps you have blogs or a YouTube channel. We're actually just announcing today officially our support for Microsoft Dynamics 365 as a data source as well. I know that many Sitecore customers also use sources like SharePoint and Dynamics as part of their environment. You can also see some of the other non-Sitecore sources listed down here at the bottom. So what does Coveo do with this information? Well, we build a cloud-hosted index of that content. Essentially, we're reading all the documents and the permissions associated with them, indexing them, making them searchable, and providing the ability to build search interfaces that interact with or search these data sources to present potentially a unified result list across all of those sources. And of course, we also provide the administrators, if you will, with the ability to tune relevance. Think of Coveo as not just a content indexing and search engine, but really a relevance engine. That's the key concept that I'll probably be mentioning a few times in today's demo. It's obviously important to be able to do basic searching, but what's really important on your site, no matter what kind of site you're running, a commerce site, an informational site, customer support related site, it's really important is to provide the most relevant content at the top of the list, because people don't have the patience to go through multiple pages. And we'll show you some nice examples of that, of course, here today. And Coveo can do that through a variety of means. That might be rules that you define within the Sitecore search page itself to boost certain kinds of content or to personalize the results. If you're using Sitecore's personalization capabilities, Coveo can take advantage of that to boost the content that has been tagged for the persona that the user is exhibiting. And Coveo can also have our own rules for tunable precision and relevance. And these may be rules you define. There are certainly times where you know what the best content is. And they can also be driven by machine learning based on the usage analytics information we gather about user behavior. So what do users search for? What do they click on? What do they do next? What content is actually helping them to do whatever it is you want them to do on your site, whether it's purchase something or support them or what have you. So all of that information is also stored by Coveo and leveraged through our machine learning-driven techniques in order to tune the relevance of results. Specific to Sitecore, of course, Coveo has a very tight integration with Sitecore, both on, I guess, what I could call the back end, the indexing process. There is a Coveo module that is installed on the Sitecore server that works very much like the way in which the out-of-the-box Solar and Lucene indexes work, in that when a new page is published from Sitecore, it gets pushed to Coveo for indexing. Big difference here, of course, is, well, one of the big differences is that Coveo is in the cloud, so you don't have to actually manage the Coveo infrastructure within your organization. We do also, as I mentioned, enable you to also index and take advantage of those personas that perhaps you're building within Sitecore, and the profile card information attached to any of the pages that you're publishing. So again, the content is pushed from Sitecore to Coveo to be indexed. We also provide a set of components on the search side as you're creating your search interface within Sitecore, your search page or pages within Sitecore, so that you can really drag and drop these components: search box, filters or facets, sorting components, tabs, result list templates. All that sort of stuff is things that we deploy for you into your Sitecore environment, and you can customize the look and feel of how search is going to work on your site using those components, rather than writing code from scratch. So that's a little bit of a quick architectural and descriptive overview of what Coveo for Sitecore is all about. I'm going to swap over and show you a couple of demos now, and then get into a little bit of the back end as well as we go through today's relatively brief introduction session. So I try and pick a couple of different use cases, I suppose, for the demos that we'd like to do in these monthly sessions. So I'm going to pick one here that's a relatively new customer, Alcatel-Lucent. They've deployed Sitecore and Coveo on their really support knowledge base, if you will. So there's a lot of content here. They're Alcatel-Lucent, of course, a technology company. They're publishing a lot of different kinds of content: customer references, documentation, other resources, videos. Coveo is indexing all of that information and making it available through this search page. You'll see a number of standard components that Coveo provides really out of the box. And honestly, this implementation is a relatively vanilla implementation of Coveo. There's a little different look and feel, perhaps. The grayed out boxes that you see here are probably not our standard CSS style sheets, but we do provide you with those style sheets so that you can make search look like a really tightly integrated part of your site, rather than something bolted on from the outside. What you do see here in terms of components that are very common across our customer base are things like tabs at the top. These are really ways of filtering your search results, pre or post search. I haven't really done a search yet, but I'd like to narrow my results into, say, customer references or videos, for example. Or indeed search across everything that's been published and accessible to me. So these tabs are, again, Coveo components. There's sort components here. By default, they're sorting the results by relevance, but indeed, once you've done a search, you might want to say, I want the most recent news. So a sort component such as this tends to be pretty useful as well. Of course, a nice big search box. Best practices, we always like to say, make the search box big and prominent on your site so that people will be driven to it. People who are on your site are typically going to be using search, and as you build an excellent and relevant search experience, you do want to make that really front and center on your site. And we find that the most successful implementations tend to do that. Then another very common sort of component here is what we often call facets or filters over on the left-hand side. These are really based on metadata, Sitecore fields or other metadata fields from non-Sitecore content that we can leverage to, again, help the user to drill down to the kind of content they're looking for. So whatever filters and facets are relevant or useful for your users, whatever metadata is useful, can easily be exposed here as a filter or a facet. You can see some interesting examples here, whether based on industry or product and solution from Alcatel, or indeed based on language. Of course, Coveo has very strong multilingual capabilities to index and search many different languages. About 40 different languages are completely supported, but we also do basic support for a wide variety of others. And what do you do with these filters and facets? Well, of course, you can check on a checkbox and reduce reduce the scope of your query, either, again, before or after you do a search. In this case, actually, they've got hierarchical filters and facets on their page. again, derived from the content that they're publishing, primarily from Sitecore here. So you can be really specific about the kinds of content you want to dig into. I'm looking for a country page, perhaps, related to Alcatel's offices in different locations. Perhaps I could search for the word office as an example. One of the other things that you'll see as we go through these couple examples are what we often refer to as query suggestions or type ahead suggestions. So the content of these suggestions, which of course we all expect from a search technology nowadays, can be driven by a couple of different kinds of sources. Again, this can be pulled out of metadata that we're indexing, fields that were properties that we're indexing from Sitecore, or they can be combined together with really driven by machine learning to make better query suggestions based on the successful searches that other people have done. You'll notice that I've actually misspelled the word office here intentionally. We can still make good suggestions to the user here because a number of other users have searched for the word office and have gotten results they clicked on. Hence, we're saying this is a good query that you might possibly do that's kind of close to what you're actually typing in. So obviously I can select that search, and given that I've selected a country page here, I'm drilling down to specific office locations. You can see search terms being highlighted in a little extract of the document here as well. Pardon me. So a relatively simple example, I think, of relevance on a search page here. I think some of the, again, key concepts I'd like to emphasize are things like this query suggestion here. I can drive that and drive user behavior towards content that actually exists on my site. You don't need to maintain a dictionary of possible suggestions to make to the user. This is just coming out of your content and coming out of what have other people been searching for. That gives me good results. So we're learning automatically here from the user's behavior, and I can dig into content about, for example, the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Apparently, one of the references of Alcatel-Lucent. I'm going to show you a couple of other examples, and you're going to see some very common, similar concepts. But they have slightly different use cases, perhaps. The government of Saskatchewan is a customer of ours. They have a large amount of content for both residents of the province of Saskatchewan and of course, people who do business with the government of Saskatchewan, and indeed tourists and such as well. Again, I start to type in a query here. Perhaps I'm looking for information about a health card. Again, query suggestions driven by tagging or fields that have come out of Sitecore make it very easy for users to dig down and find exactly the kind of content that they're looking for. They've got a nicely laid out site in many ways, tagging their content in Sitecore itself with information about what kind of audience each page would be appropriate for. And I think this makes it very easy for a user to self-identify, effectively picking their persona, I guess. Say, well, you know, I'm a resident. I'm looking for information about how to update my health card, and we're seeing the most relevant content up here at the top. But again, you can filter by a variety of other pieces of information over here as well. So again, a relatively simple look and feel. You'll see it's a little different look and feel, perhaps, than Alcatel-Lucent in terms of the style sheets and such that have been applied as well. I guess the last quick example I'm going to show you that's a little different in the use case is more of a commerce-related website. So again, this is running on Sitecore. It's using Coveo for the search technology. As far as I know, actually, all of the content in their case is coming from Sitecore itself, but it's both products and also articles. You can see here, again, leveraging Coveo's tabs and filters and facets here to show different kinds of information. They're also taking advantage of Coveo's machine learning capabilities, both for promoting the best content, the content that most people are consuming, purchasing perhaps, and also making those kind of query suggestions. So if I don't know how to spell the word vitamin, as an example here, we're getting better and more specific queries. The more terms I type in here, vitamin C, zinc and vitamin C, perhaps I'm looking for information about vitamin C on their particular site, and I'm getting both products here, and you can see not just a little a textual look and feel, but really a card-based, more visual look and feel, showing pictures of the product, ratings of a product, prices, of course. Now, in their case, they're filtering or providing the ability to filter based on what sort of age might be appropriate for a given product. They're not filtering based on price, but you certainly can do that. So if you've got a price catalog as part of your Sitecore or non-Sitecore data sources. You could use that as a numeric filter here to limit your results to a particular price range, perhaps. And of course, they have the ability also to search articles that they published as well. So whether you wanted to bring those together into a single, all results sort of tab, or have very distinct products versus articles tabs here, these are certainly capabilities that you can deploy very easily with Coveo for Sitecore. With that, I'd like to show you just a quick overview of what Coveo looks like within the context of Sitecore itself. And let's see, have I been logged out since yeah, I've been logged out. Bear with me here a second. Top secret login and password here. Oops. Let me log out and make sure I can get to the editor here. There we go. So as I mentioned, when you configure Coveo for Sitecore, there is a component, a module that is installed on the Sitecore server. And you'll see here in the control panel that there is now this Coveo for Sitecore module. There are a number of administrative things that you can do with Coveo for Sitecore. We do provide, for example, a nice diagnostic page. Essentially, this is validating connections to my cloud instance of Coveo. Again, the Coveo index itself is hosted in the cloud, and high availability and scalability is maintained by Coveo. Of course, you have the ability as an administrator to manage the sources that you're indexing, be they Sitecore or non-Sitecore content. You'll also see down here as we scroll down a little bit information, obviously, about the version of Coveo for Sitecore that's installed on your Sitecore server, any information about usage and so on. Also a series of configuration files, which is where you can configure things like what parts of Sitecore pages would you like to index. Typically, you'd want to exclude, say, headers, footers, sidebars, those sorts of things, because they don't add to the relevance of search results. You can also configure which parts of your Sitecore content tree you want to index. Perhaps you want to focus on, say, just the product catalog or some certain informational pages. You don't need to crawl or index your entire Sitecore set of data. For example, test pages, you don't typically want to index those, so you'd put them in a different section of your Sitecore content tree and make modifications to these config files to define which content, in fact, you're indexing, which you're searching. The management of your indexes is very similar, if you're already familiar, to how you manage your default Sitecore indexes. It's done through the indexing manager here. You'll see that we actually create two new indexes, Sitecore indexes, that are Coveo Master and Coveo Web. So we're indexing the Master and Web. We're taking over, effectively, the Master and Web indexes from Sitecore. And again, when you publish new content, that content is pushed automatically to these new Coveo indexes. Then the other aspect, really, of Coveo for Sitecore is the front end, the search interface. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Coveo provides a set of components so that you build one or more search interfaces for use within Sitecore. I've got an example here of a page that I've configured. Actually, let me go into my experience editor. The way that these Coveo components work is that you can use them within your Sitecore experience editor. So I can build my search page here leveraging a set of components, facets like this. This is a component that I've dragged and dropped or placed onto the page. So the idea here is that this is an environment for somebody who's comfortable in Sitecore already. They're a Sitecore content creator, a page creator perhaps. And they don't need to actually know terribly much about Coveo in order to create and maintain and configure a rich search interface here. I can go in and look at my search box. What sort of behavior am I looking for within search? Do I want, for example, wildcard searching enabled, like an asterisk at the end of a word to be able to look for any variant terms? I can simply enable that rather than having to go in and create code to do that sort of thing. Those query suggestions that we were seeing on a couple of those websites, again, they're checkbox configuration options here. I can also look at some much richer capabilities here within Coveo by looking at the search interface component, really the master component for this page. Some of the things that you can do in here include boosting or filtering rules. These are very familiar to you if you're already working in Sitecore. These are the sorts of rules that you're defining to manage the content management system itself. Well, you can also use these same sort of rules within Coveo to boost certain kinds of content. And just as a quick example, if I wanted to boost specific parts of my content tree in search results, assuming, of course, that the user's query matches some of the words within the document, I can create a rule like this and say, well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to return, or I'd like to boost higher up in my result list any pages that are team pages. A typical example might be if I've got frequently asked question pages, a particular template or a particular part of my content tree devoted to frequently asked questions. I could define a rule here to say, let's boost by, say, oh, I don't know, 100. Some nice big number. Any rules, whoops, get rid of that rule. I didn't actually want to create two, just the one. I can create a little rule here to do exactly that. So here we're boosting that rule, that kind of content automatically. And again, this is a pretty advanced sort of option to be able to do, but in a way that is familiar to people who are working within Sitecore already. You'll notice also down here the ability to automatically boost results based on the user's pattern. So this is where we tie into the personalization capabilities that Sitecore itself has, an ability to create personas and rules around personas and to tag content with profile cards. So simply by creating a checkbox here and maybe changing some options, you can take advantage of that work that you've already done in personalizing your content to have that personalization apply also to how search works and the order and the relevance of results that come back in from a search. Many other options here, and by no means am I going to try to go through all of them here today. Again, this is a relatively brief introduction to Coveo for Sitecore. Really just want to hit the high points for you here today. Lots of other options here that that you can take advantage of as you're configuring your user search experience. We'd also see here that this ability to create facets of various kinds. I've got a little slider facet for content based on date, and you can certainly imagine that you could apply the same sort of thing to price information if you're working with a commerce type website. There are options around sorting here by date and relevance. And again, these are components that you can configure. The look and feel from a list view or a card view is easily selectable here. Many other options here as well. We'd be happy to explore these with you depending on your requirements in a more personalized demo session. With that, I'd like to show you a little bit of what Coveo adds on the back end. Again, the administration of the Coveo cloud-based index. Coveo takes care of the high availability, the scalability of the platform. And of course, you get an individualized single-tenant instance of Coveo resident within our cloud, which is where your index is stored and where usage analytics information is logged. I haven't talked terribly much about this, but it's really important and really key to the success of any search implementation is understanding what are people doing with it? What are they searching for? What are they clicking on? What's the context of the user? Where are they from, perhaps? So we do pick up things like the user's IP address, or whether they're on a mobile or non-mobile device or a particular browser type. And this enables you to, again, potentially personalize your results, but also certainly to understand, certainly as a starting point, what are people doing on your site? Maybe what are people from the state of Maine doing on my website? It's a good question. What are people from the state of Maine doing on my website? I could drill in here into this dashboard to look at what are they searching for? What are they clicking on? Here in a general sense, or what are the top queries from everybody on my site within this particular date range? How busy is my site? What are the various tabs or even search pages that people are navigating to on my site? This is going to help me to improve my content and how search works on my site. As some people have said, and I'm probably paraphrasing badly here, you can't improve what you can't measure. And the measurability of search is something we take very seriously. I think it's a really important part of what Coveo provides, is this logging and dashboarding and reporting on search. Again, this is also what feeds into our usage analytics platform, feeds into our machine learning engine in order to be able to automatically improve search results based on user behavior in order to be able to make those kinds of query suggestions and recommendations that we had a quick look at in some of our example demos. Bit of a richer dashboard here on the Query Performance tab. What are the top searches that don't lead to any results? You might want to look at this on a semi-regular basis to understand what are the words people are looking for on your site and not getting anything, or not clicking on anything, or in a commerce context, not purchasing anything, perhaps. And this is going to help you to potentially either create new content, re-tag your content appropriately, use the words that your customers are using, or potentially create synonyms within the Coveo thesaurus, which I'll show you in just a second, because they're just using different terminology than you are, and you want to create synonyms to help guide them towards the content that you know exists. Typical examples that you might want to take advantage of. Those sorts of synonyms, by the way, are managed in a place we would call a query pipeline. And there's quite a lot of relevance tuning that you can do in here as well. I'm not, again, going to get into all the details, but this is where you could define synonyms as an example, featured results or best bets for particular queries. You notice that you can also apply conditions to these sorts of things as well, based on things like locale, or is the user signed in, not signed in to your site, that sort of thing. Many other capabilities here to tune the relevance of search, really in addition to those rules that we saw within the Sitecore search page itself. I would also highlight that, and this can be really important in a real world deployment, you can have more than one query pipeline. And a query pipeline is really just a set of business rules that determine how a search works. What's it going to do? What's it going to return to my users? Well, the importance of having multiple query pipelines might be that you might want to apply different rules for different pages on your site, perhaps, for different kinds of users, or as you're trying out new rules, you're always trying to optimize how search works on your site. You can do A/B testing across. I've got my default rule, it's working reasonably well, but I want to try some new things. Let's do some A/B testing across these rules. Send half of my real live users perhaps to pipeline 2 and half to default 2. I picked rather bad names for these, in order to see, well, how are they actually working in the real world? Are they leading to better click-through percentages, better purchase ratios, those sorts of things? That's where the A/B testing across query pipelines proves hugely valuable. And really just the last thing I'm going to show here within the Coveo administration tool is really briefly, this is where you can see all of the different sources, data sources that I've indexed. I've indexed a wide variety of site maps or websites. I've got content from Salesforce organization. I've been using our indexing API to index some custom databases. And of course, I've got my Sitecore indexes. Of course, those are actually managed from Sitecore itself, as we saw, via that indexing pipeline. But the other kinds of data sources, and Microsoft Dynamics down here as well, as I mentioned, we're just officially announcing our support for that today. But creating an index on a website really is just a matter of defining a starting URL, some rules around what pages to include, what kinds of pages to include based on their perhaps their domain or the depth that you want us to go and crawl there. So you can define quite nicely scope the kind of content you want to extract there. For many kinds of content management systems, a website, a site map is easily accessible, and that's a really quick way to index non-Sitecore content management systems. Again, we're not as tightly integrated to those other CMS systems as we are to Sitecore, but we can still index and make accessible content from your blogs, perhaps, or other sites that you have. I did mention also, I think YouTube channels is another option. There are many different kinds of sources that we. Oops, I hit the wrong button. If I wanted to add a source, these are some of the examples of types of data sources that Coveo is able to index and make searchable on your site. And again, you can combine all that together in your unified search experience, whether you're using different tabs to focus the scope of your search, or indeed just having an undifferentiated set of results there. That's all accessible to you. So I've pretty much reached the end of what I was hoping to demo for you today. Again, this is really just intended to be a quick introduction, what's Coveo for Sitecore all about, show you a little of the details and perhaps a couple of reasonably nice implementations of Coveo for Sitecore, and hopefully get your interest in perhaps having a more one-on-one conversation about your particular needs. With that, Clara, I'm just really wrapping up. If there are any questions coming in through the question panel, I'd be happy to take those today, or perhaps answer later if time does not permit.
Thank you, Thank you so much, Paul. We do have a few questions, but everyone, please feel free to type the questions in the section panel. You still have time, and we still have time to answer your questions. So a first question we have for you, Paul, is, are Coveo Analytics available for the non-enterprise and non-cloud versions of Sitecore?
Are Coveo Analytics available for the non-enterprise and non-cloud versions of Sitecore? Just to clarify, if I understand the question correctly, I would say yes. Coveo Analytics does not rely on Sitecore Analytics directly. We actually log to our own analytics platform, all of that search information, click information, potentially even custom events like purchases, I sort of alluded to earlier. It doesn't rely on Sitecore Analytics at all. We do, by the way, coexist nicely. You can log the same events to both Sitecore Analytics and Coveo Analytics if you'd like. There are certainly reasons why you might want to use both. Hopefully I got the gist of the question correctly. Please feel free to ask a follow-up if I have not.
No, thank you. That's good. We have other questions. Another one is, can Coveo handle a product catalog of 15 million items?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a very interesting question, actually. Coveo historically, our index has actually had a limitation at about 50 million items. However, just recently we've announced a new option, really, with Coveo, which we're calling Coveo on Elasticsearch, to differentiate from Coveo for Sitecore, which allows us to use Elasticsearch as the core indexing platform of Coveo. It's still managed through that same administration interface that you'll see here. So you're still creating sources in the traditional way. Coveo provides the connectivity to Sitecore, to sitemaps, to databases, and so on. But the actual index, the real searchable core, if you will, of Coveo can be now running on Elasticsearch, which is an incredibly scalable platform. So we would be able to go past that limitation we've had in the past of around 50 million documents with that kind of architecture. Be very happy to talk to you about that in more detail. It's a bit outside the scope of what we'd planned for today's session, but be very interested to hear more about your requirements there. So do feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you. Another question, can we create custom index in Coveo, let's say for items of specific Sitecore data templates?
Yes, you can. We don't typically see people doing that. However, most often what we'll do, and I'll swap back over here to the Sitecore control panel. What we'll typically do actually is put everything into one source, if you will, into one index, one Sitecore index, and filter results at search time based on, for example, the template. I showed you the example of boosting results based on where in the content tree the content is. You can certainly also do the same sort of thing based on template. And again, that editor that we saw allows you to create the rules for filtering results or boosting results based on attributes such as, what template is this a part of? That can be very easily done. But if you have other reasons to create a custom index, certainly you can do that. It's just that I would say it's not typically what our customers will do. It tends to be a little trickier to, well, not trickier. It just tends to be not so much a best practice, I guess.
Thank you. Another question, have you integrated with Hybris?
Not directly that I recall. Often what we'll see is that Hybris content, what we'll see sometimes at least, is that Hybris content may be published or shared into Sitecore, in which case we'll be able to index it like any other content within Sitecore. In other cases, we would interact with Hybris or index Hybris via our indexing API potentially, or that sitemap connector that we looked at. There are a number of ways that we can integrate with systems that we don't have an explicit connector for. Be happy to talk about your use case in more detail at your convenience, of course.
Thank you. Another question we have, can the Coveo indexes replace the Sitecore indexes, or are they still needed?
Yeah, great question. We definitely don't recommend replacing all of the, what I would call internal Sitecore indexes that are really used for, quick database lookup primarily. A couple good reasons for that. Well, one is that Solr is now in Sitecore 9 really mandatory. Solr or as you search as your basic content indexing engine, really for, again, those effectively quick database lookup functionalities that are required to run Sitecore. The other main reason that we wouldn't really recommend using Coveo to replace all of those is that it would become costly for you. Coveo for Sitecore is typically priced based on the number of queries per month, and we won't get into the details of the pricing right now, but it is publicly available on our website. So if you're using Coveo to run all of these quick database lookup functionalities, it's going to become more costly than our customers would like to pay for that. That's why we really strongly don't recommend using Coveo to replace all of the Sitecore index.
Thank you. Does Coveo Cloud work with multi-regional content delivery centers?
Yes, absolutely. You would install the Coveo for Sitecore module on each of your content delivery servers, and of course on the content management server as well. And really, you would have, though, just a single centralized Coveo Cloud index. All of your content delivery servers would really would be configured to point to and send their search queries to the same Coveo index. They might have different rules around what kind of content to return, again, based on their locale. But they would all be pointing to this single index, which really is generated out of the content management server. But the content delivery server is really where the search happens effectively, and then is directed to our API via the cloud.
Thank you. Does Coveo have any future plans to integrate voice search?
Voice search. That's a very interesting sort of area that, of course, we're very interested in. Voice search and chat bots and things like that. Definitely things that we're looking into. What I don't think, and I might not have the final word on this. I don't think that what we would be looking at is actually transcribing voice, transcribing the voice question into text, and then doing the search. But the sort of things that become interesting when you start to look at voice search tend to be like people ask longer questions or do ask more of a question and less of a simple keyword search. So what we already have some capabilities in that area to figure out what are the most important words in a lengthy question and to boost the importance of those in the search. We refer to that often, and you'll see this on our website, as intelligent term detection. And that, to me, would be a really important component of quote unquote supporting voice search. But again, I don't think that what we would do, because there are lots of other technologies out there, would be to actually transcribe the question that a person asks into keywords. We would take over the search after that, if you will. I hope that helps. It's a very interesting area for us in the near future.
Thank you. We have another question. Why isn't Coveo listed as a search engine on the Sitecore search page?
Why isn't Coveo listed as a search engine on the Sitecore search page? I'd be interested to know which page you mean. You do actually need to install Coveo for Sitecore as a module within Sitecore before you will see, say, this Coveo search option over here, or the option to create indexes down at the bottom. But you can either ask a follow-up question to clarify, perhaps, or we can follow up with an email to you.
The person provided the link. It seems to be a link that goes to the Sitecore experience platform, search and indexing using Solr or Lucene. If that rings a bell.
Yeah, of course. So the Solr and Lucene are provided out of the box as part of Sitecore. Coveo has a very tight partnership with Sitecore and has had for 7 or 8 years now. But we're not an out-of-the-box, freely available search option. We are an independent company, of course, and we do sell our product as an additional option onto Sitecore. I will have a look at the link that you provided. Thank you for that. And if necessary, we might follow up with the Sitecore marketing team to ask them to make us a little more prominent on their site. But thank you for that.
Thank you for your answer. So I don't see any more questions for today. Please feel free to email us if you have any further questions. We'll be happy to answer. But I think now will be a great time to wrap up. Just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off. We'll send a recording to all attendees within the next 24 hours. And please remember to help us improve future webinars by completing the brief survey at the end of the session. On behalf of Paul and the rest of the team, I'd like to thank you for attending our Coveo for Sitecore demo webinar session. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.